Today I will tell you a story about love, a story that seems very simple but has a very deep meaning. I invite you to listen.
The sky was gray, signaling an uneasy week ahead. Jane rushed out of her tiny apartment in the city center, clutching a cold piece of bread, her eyes barely open. Crap! I'm late! The bus had just pulled away as she arrived, panting. With no other choice, she flagged down a taxi, a luxury for someone living on an office worker's salary. Jane, 25, was independent, strong, and experienced. But behind that exterior was a heart full of scars, especially the one from 3 years ago, a wound that had never truly healed. She had loved, dreamed, hoped, and then was left without a word. Jane entered the company building, out of breath. The clock read 7:59. Just in time. She quickly fixed her hair, straightened her blouse, and dashed to the 15th floor meeting room, where the new executive director was about to be introduced. Everyone was already seated. The air was formal and tense. Jane slipped quietly into a seat at the end of the row, lowered her head, and took a deep breath, trying to calm her pounding heart. The new director hadn't arrived yet. Rumor had it he'd been transferred from the Singapore branch, young, talented, mysterious. Said to be a cold-hearted heartthrob. Whatever. Not her problem. The door opened. Firm footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. Jane looked up, and her heart stopped. The man walking in was Jack. There was no mistaking him. Tall, composed, with the same deep, cold eyes as before. Those eyes once looked at her with love. And those same eyes had disappeared from her life without a single explanation. The room applauded to welcome the new director. Jack stepped forward, his voice calm, distant, yet captivating. I'm Jack, and I'll be overseeing operations at the Ho Chi Minh City branch from today. I look forward to working with you all. His eyes stopped, right where Jane was sitting, longer than usual. Then he turned away as if he had never known her. After the meeting, Jane had just stepped out of the room when a deep voice spoke from behind. Miss Jane, I'd like to speak with you for a moment. She turned around. It was Jack. The meeting room was empty now. Only Jane and Jack remained, standing across from each other after 3 long years apart. The silence was suffocating. Jane clenched her fists, her nails digging into her skin. I don't think there's anything left for us to say. Jack looked at her, his gaze cold as a winter dawn. I didn't expect to see you here. His voice was still the same, low, gentle, but carrying a pressure that made it hard to breathe. Jane tried to stay composed. I'm here to work, not to reopen old wounds. He nodded and turned to leave. But just as his hand touched the doorknob, he stopped. 3 years ago, you didn't wait for me. She froze. I waited. For a long time. But you were the one who disappeared. There was nothing more to say. That night, Jane lay sprawled on her bed, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Old memories came flooding back like scenes from an old movie. They had once been madly in love, once dreamed of a small house, children with her eyes and his smile. Until one morning, he vanished without a word. His phone unreachable. Social media gone. The shared apartment emptied. She'd nearly lost her mind. But somehow, she learned to forget. Or at least she thought she had. Her phone lit up. A message from an unknown number appeared. You shouldn't come back into his life. He has someone else now. Attached was a photo, Jack and a woman stepping out of a luxury restaurant. The woman was smiling, her hand clinging tightly to his. Jane zoomed in. That face looked familiar. Too familiar. The woman was Lena, her so-called best friend from university. The one who had once sworn, over my dead body would I ever steal your man. Jane let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Lena. So you finally made your move. The next day during an internal company meeting, Jack walked in with a woman by his side. Long hair, graceful posture, a smile sweet as sugar. This is Lena Morgan, our new head of HR. She'll be working directly with me on the upcoming projects. Lena's eyes scanned the room and landed on Jane. A thin, knowing smile curled on her lips. Between them, it was no longer just about work. The meeting room echoed with applause. Welcoming the new head of HR, Lena Morgan. Jane kept her expression neutral, but inside, a storm was brewing. Lena wasn't just an old friend, she had witnessed every moment between Jane and Jack back when they were in love. The three of them had once been the unbreakable trio in college, until everything shattered without explanation. And now Lena returned flawless, alluring, and most of all, hand in hand with Jack. After the meeting, Lena walked straight toward Jane as if the past 3 years meant nothing. Jane, I didn't expect to see you here. Still the same fiery spirit, huh? Jane offered a faint smile, unclear if it was polite or sarcastic. Yeah. And you, well, this is a surprise. Lena looped her arm around Jane's like old times, as if nothing had ever happened. Come have coffee with me? It's been ages since we talked. Jane wanted to say no, but under the watchful eyes of colleagues, she couldn't stir up trouble, not on Lena's first day. At a cafe near the office, quiet, elegant, and exactly Lena's taste, the two sat down. Lena stirred her cappuccino, flashing a soft smile. I know things ended messily between you and Jack, but I hope it won't affect our work. Jack and I were just old friends. Jane raised an eyebrow. Then why were you walking out of that restaurant with his arm around yours? Lena laughed, breezy and unbothered. Oh, someone sent you a photo? Jealous? Jane clenched her fists beneath the table. No, just surprised. Especially since the one who used to say, we're just friends, is now showing up with him like a couple. Lena lowered her gaze, chuckling softly. Time changes a lot of things, Jane. People too. That night, Jane sat in her tiny apartment, head spinning. 3 years ago, Jack had vanished. She'd suspected many things, but she never imagined Lena might have been behind it all. Now the puzzle pieces were starting to surface, blurry but impossible to ignore. Her phone lit up. Another anonymous message. She never gave up on Jack. Don't be so naive, Jane. Across the city, in Jack's private office, Lena walked in without knocking, placing a paper bag on his desk. Dinner? I know you hate eating alone. Jack didn't look up. His voice was quiet, detached. I thought I made it clear whatever we had ended a long time ago. Lena moved closer, gently resting her hand on his shoulder. Did it really? Then why did you let me come back? The room fell into silence. The next morning, Jane arrived at the office earlier than usual. She needed to avoid Jack's eyes and Lena's. But just as she stepped into the elevator, the door slid shut, and a familiar voice echoed beside her. Good morning, Jack. She glanced at him and gave a subtle nod. No words. You're still the same, he said. When you don't like someone, you're cold as ice. Jane let out a short, dry laugh. Well, you should know ice was once water. Soft, fragile. Jack went silent. After a pause, he spoke again. What happened 3 years ago? It wasn't as simple as you think. She turned to look him straight in the eye. Then tell me what simple means to you. A breakup? Or not even a goodbye text? Jack looked like he was about to respond, but just then, ding. The elevator doors opened on their floor. Jane stepped out first. She didn't want to hear it. Not yet. Not now. In the cafeteria, Jane sat alone, stirring a cup of cold tea. Inside her, memories stirred like waves crashing to shore. 3 years ago, one winter evening, she went to Jack's apartment as usual. The place was empty. No furniture. No trace. Not even a note. She once thought he'd gotten into an accident. She searched for him. She cried every night. But in the end, his silence was her answer. A departure without remorse. A scar that never healed. Miss Carter. Jane looked up. Standing in front of her was a tall young man with wavy hair and a charming sunlit smile. His name tag read, Ethan Walker, Project Development Manager. I heard you'll be leading the upcoming project with the Singapore team? That's right. Is there a problem? Jane replied, guarded. Ethan smiled gently. Not at all. Just sounds like we'll be working closely together. Hope you're not too strict. Jane paused for a moment. For the first time in days she felt a flicker of ease. I'll try to be less icy. That night, Jack sat alone in his high-rise apartment. The warm light cast tired shadows across his face. He opened a small box from the bottom drawer. Inside was a silver ring, untouched. Still new. And a letter never sent. Jane, if you're reading this, it probably means I never made it back in time. Meeting room, 21st floor, usually reserved for top-level discussions. Today it was unusually crowded. The collaboration project with Singapore was a major strategic move for the company. And all four of them, Jane, Jack, Lena, and Ethan, were present. The air inside the room was so cold there was no need for air conditioning. Ethan sat beside Jane, relaxed and confident. He placed a folder on the table and leaned in slightly. If anything's unclear, I've got your back. Don't worry. Jane gave a soft smile. A faint sense of safety passed through her, though she couldn't name it. Lena sat across the table, her eyes never leaving Jane's movements. And Jack, his face as calm and unreadable as ever, occasionally glanced at Jane, as if out of old habit. The meeting began. Ethan led with an overview of strategy, resource allocation, and budget. He was clear, articulate. Jane followed, presenting risk assessments and data analysis from previous campaigns. Her voice was firm, composed. Everyone listened attentively. Then came Lena's turn. She stood up, shooting Jane a fleeting glance before she began. In my opinion, Ms. Carter's analysis is quite detailed, but perhaps a little rigid. We're working with Asian partners. They value flexibility, not just numbers. A subtle jab. Sharp, but wrapped in politeness. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So you're suggesting we rely on gut feeling instead of data? Lena smiled smoothly. I'm simply emphasizing that experience and intuition can be just as valuable. Jane set her pen down and looked straight at Lena. My intuition tells me that ignoring data will double the risk. And I'm not willing to gamble the company's future on personal instincts. Silence fell over the room for a brief moment. Jack looked up slightly, his expression unreadable. The meeting ended under a heavy cloud. People began to file out. Ethan intentionally slowed his pace to match Jane's. You handled that well. Want to grab a coffee? My treat. Jane nodded slightly, but before she could reply, a voice called from behind. Jane. I need a word. It was Jack. Ethan glanced at him, smirking faintly. I'll wait in the lobby. If you're not out in 15 minutes. I'll assume I'm drinking alone. Jane nodded and turned back into the room. Now it was just the two of them. Jack leaned on the table, his gaze fixed on her. You've really changed. You're not the same Jane I used to know. She gave a thin smile. Thanks for disappearing. It taught me how to stand on my own. He was quiet for a moment, then said softly. Do you really believe what Lena said? Jane raised an eyebrow. What are you implying? Jack pulled out a folded photo, the one of him and Lena outside the restaurant. I know you received this. But things aren't always what they seem. Jane glanced at the picture, then back at him. I'm tired, Jack. I'm done trying to decode you. She turned and walked away, leaving him behind. For the first time, his eyes truly wavered. In the elevator, Jane stepped in and found Ethan already inside. He smiled and held out a cup of bubble tea. No time for coffee. But I figured you could use something sweet. For whatever it is you're dealing with. Jane chuckled. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe again. And maybe the old scar wasn't the only thing that hurt anymore. The Anderson estate stood tall at the edge of the city, guarded not just by security cameras and iron gates, but by decades of secrets. Jack hadn't returned here in over 2 years. As he stepped through the grand oak doors, the scent of cedar and cold marble hit him like a wave of memories. He was greeted by the butler with a polite nod. Your father is waiting in the study. Sir. Jack gave a silent nod, walking down the familiar corridor. The study was dimly lit, with shelves of books lining every wall. And in the center, sitting behind a desk larger than necessary, was Mr. Charles Anderson, Jack's father. Without looking up, the man said coldly, "You're 2 years late, Jack." "I didn't come for you," Jack replied. "I came for answers." Charles chuckled bitterly. "You walked away from this family, from the company, from everything because of her. And now you want answers. What did you do to Jane?" Jack's voice was sharp now. "Nothing. I simply protected you from yourself." Jack's hands curled into fists. "You sent someone to threaten her. You made her believe I left without a word. Because she was a distraction. You had a future, Jack. And love only makes men weak." Meanwhile, back in the city, Jane was typing up her report when her phone buzzed. Anonymous message. "He didn't leave because he wanted to. He was forced." Her heart skipped a beat. For a moment the screen blurred. Another message followed. "Ask Lena. She knows more than she pretends." Jane stared at the name. Lena Morgan. The friend she once trusted with her life. Could she really have been involved? That evening at a rooftop lounge, Lena met someone in secret. Dressed in black, her face half hidden under her hat. A man passed her an envelope. "This is the last of it. After this, we're done." Lena opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents, old emails, and a photo of Jack and Jane, taken years ago, smiling in front of the university gates. She sighed. She was never supposed to come back into his life. Jack sat in his apartment, rereading the letter he never sent. "Jane, I never meant to leave. They made me choose between you and everything I was born into. I chose you, but they took that choice away." As the city lights flickered outside the window, Jack realized, if he didn't fight back now, he would lose her all over again. Rain tapped gently against the office windows. Jane sat in front of her computer, but her mind wasn't on the glowing screen. Her eyes were fixed on the message still open on her phone. "Ask Lena. She knows more than she pretends." Her gut twisted. Lena had always been the confident one, the beautiful one, the smooth talker. Jane used to admire her, trust her. But trust, once cracked, never quite fit back the same. She opened her email, searched for a keyword. Singapore project, Lena Morgan. Several messages popped up. Most were routine. But one stood out, a forwarded document, time-stamped a day before Lena was officially hired. "That's impossible," Jane whispered. Later that day, Ethan caught Jane in the hallway. "You all right?" he asked, eyes searching her face. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Actually, I need a favor." "Name it." "Can you look into Lena's employment record?" Quietly, Ethan tilted his head. "Digging up dirt on a colleague? That's not like you." "It's not about dirt," Jane said softly. "It's about the truth." Ethan saw something in her eyes. A quiet storm. "Give me 2 hours." Meanwhile, Jack stood at the edge of his father's old study, holding an envelope tightly in one hand. Inside were records his father never meant for him to find, proof of manipulation, both personal and professional. He threatened Jane's scholarship, Jack whispered to himself, heart pounding. He pulled strings to block her job offers after graduation, just to push her away from me. And Lena? She had signed off on half of it. Rage simmered beneath his skin. Jack opened his phone. His thumb hovered over Jane's number. "Not yet. Not until I clean this mess first." That evening, Ethan returned to Jane's office. He tossed a USB onto her desk. "You didn't hear this from me." Jane opened the files. Emails, memos, internal messages. One of them was a recommendation letter from Charles Anderson, dated 6 months ago, endorsing Lena for a position she hadn't applied for yet. Jane leaned back, her hands shaking slightly. Why would Jack's father recommend her? They barely knew each other. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Unless she wasn't just a friend. She was working with him. At that same moment, Lena stood in her private apartment, holding a wine glass in one hand, watching the rain fall. She looked over her shoulder at a wall covered in photos. Photos of Jane, of Jack, of Ethan. Connections. Patterns. Threads. She whispered to herself. Almost perfect. But she's starting to see it. Then it's time to finish what I started. Monday morning. Jane walked into the office wearing black heels and a calm expression that didn't match the storm inside her chest. The USB from Ethan was now safely backed up in 3 locations. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was planning something bigger. She greeted her team with a polite smile, then headed straight to the executive floor. Destination: HR department. Hi. I'm here to submit a request, Jane said to the HR assistant. Regarding a review of Lena Morgan's hiring process. Something seems inconsistent. The woman hesitated. That's above my clearance, Miss Carter. Then escalate it, Jane replied, placing a formal letter on the desk. Her tone left no room for questions. I'll wait. Meanwhile, across the city, Jack stepped into a modern law office. A young man in a tailored suit greeted him. Mr. Anderson, the documents you requested are ready. In the asset transfer? Under process. You're fully separating from the Anderson estate. Are you sure about this? Jack didn't flinch. I've been sure for 3 years. He signed the papers. With one stroke. He walked away from his family's fortune, legacy, and name. Everything that once caged him. Back at the company, Jane bumped into Lena near the break room. Lena wore her usual red lipstick and confidence like armor. You look busy, she said, sipping her coffee. Digging into old files takes time, Jane replied casually. That's a dangerous habit. You never know what skeletons you'll find. Jane smiled, just enough to sting. Oh, I've already found a few. They're quite chatty, actually. Lena's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Just enough for Jane to know. She felt the pressure. That evening, Jane sat at a rooftop cafe with Ethan. She knows I'm onto her, Jane said, stirring her tea. Then we make her act first. Ethan replied. Cornered people make mistakes. So do the ones who think they've won. Jane pulled out her phone and pressed send. To Charles Anderson. Subject, compromise. Attachment. Legal documents plus email evidence. It was time to shake the tree. Lena received a call at midnight. They found the files, said a voice on the line. She didn't speak. She simply stood up and walked to her desk drawer. Inside was a flash drive. A different one. She held it in her hand and whispered to herself. If Jane wants a war, she's about to get one. It started with a whisper. A casual question in the hallway. An odd look during a meeting. Then came the email. Subject, possible data leak involving Jane Carter. From Anonymous. 2. Internal Audit and Security Division. By noon, the entire floor was buzzing. Jane sat at her desk, unaware, until she was called in. Inside the glass-walled conference room, 2 men from the compliance team sat stiffly. A folder lay in front of them. Ms. Carter, one of them began. We received a report that sensitive project data from the Singapore proposal was accessed from your account and shared externally. Jane blinked. That's impossible. I never. The logs say otherwise. We need to temporarily suspend your access while we investigate. Her heart dropped. This wasn't a warning. This was an ambush. Outside the office, Lena stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear. It's done, she said calmly. The voice on the other end responded. She won't go down easily. She doesn't have to. Lena smirked. She just needs to fall far enough to lose everything. That night, Jane paced her apartment. Laptop locked. Keycard deactivated. Reputation smeared. The only person she could think to call was Ethan. 10 minutes later, he was at her door, sleeves rolled up in coffee in hand. Someone planted it, he said, sitting across from her. Lena, Jane whispered. Ethan nodded. She spoofed your login. That's why she kept asking you to share credentials just for backup. She framed me. But we're not going to let her win. Meanwhile, Jack was watching the news in his hotel room when he saw a headline flash across the bottom of the screen. Tech executive Jane Carter under investigation for breach of confidentiality. He stared at the screen. Cold rage flooded his veins. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then called someone else. It's me. I want everything you can dig up on Lena Morgan. Tonight. The next morning, Jane arrived at the office to clean out her desk. Her co-workers avoided eye contact, even the ones who used to admire her. But then Jack walked through the front doors. Sharp suit, cold eyes. The room froze. He walked straight to the executive floor and into the CEO's office without knocking. Minutes later, the CEO himself came out, calling for Jane. Everyone turned. Miss Carter, can you come with me, please? Jane followed him, heart pounding. Inside the office, Jack stood waiting. The CEO looked at her, confused. Mr. Anderson here, just bought 17% of the company's shares overnight. He has a few questions about your suspension. Jane blinked. Jack turned to her. Let's clear your name, Jane. Back at her apartment, Lena watched the CCTV feed of the office lobby from her private server. She saw Jack. She saw Jane. And she saw her perfect game start to fall apart. She narrowed her eyes and whispered, You really think love can save her? Let's see how far you're willing to go. The boardroom was colder than usual. 12 executives sat along the long marble table. At the center stood Jane, flanked by Jack and Ethan, who had just arrived minutes earlier with a file in hand. The CEO looked tired. The head of compliance cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, before we proceed with further disciplinary action, do you have anything to say in your defense? Jane stepped forward, voice calm. Yes. I've been framed. Gasps. Whispers. One board member coughed uncomfortably. Jack nodded at Ethan, who plugged a USB into the screen projector. 2 weeks ago, Ethan began. An unauthorized device accessed the internal server using Jane Carter's credentials. But the IP address did not match her usual login location. The screen showed login data. Time. Location. Device ID. Here's where it gets interesting. Ethan clicked again. A side-by-side video showed Lena at her desk during the exact login window on a laptop Jane had never used. That device is registered under a fake company Lena created 2 years ago. It's been used to spoof access in other incidents too. Jane added. She used my credentials. She planted files. And she made sure the leak looked real. The room fell silent. The compliance officer closed his folder. I need to verify all of this. Jack stood cold and direct. You do that. But know this. If Jane walks out of here today as a scapegoat, my investment walks with her. Permanently. Later that afternoon. Lena stormed into the server room. Alone. She inserted her private flash drive into the system console. If they want to fight, I'll give them one. But she didn't notice the small camera Ethan had planted earlier, recording her every move. Back in the surveillance room, Ethan watched the feed in real time. Gotcha. Meanwhile, Jane sat across from Jack in his car outside the office. Why are you helping me? She asked. Jack looked at her, finally letting his guard drop. Because I should have done it 3 years ago. You disappeared. No. I was erased. He handed her a folder, full of the emails, messages, and bank records that proved his father orchestrated their separation. Jane's hands trembled. You gave up everything for this? Jack's voice was low. No. For you. That night, Lena received an email with no sender. Subject. Nice performance. Smile, you're on camera. Attached, A single image. Her. In the server room. For the first time in years, Lena looked afraid. She closed her laptop, lit a cigarette, and whispered, "Time to burn it all down." Rain slammed against the windows as midnight fell over the city. At a private security firm across town, a system alarm blared. Unauthorized access, Sector 3. 3 guards rushed in. But whoever broke in was already gone, leaving only one thing behind. A flash drive, labeled Jane Carter, classified. 8 a.m. The company's intranet was flooded. Breaking. Former project manager linked to corporate theft, bribery, and academic fraud. Dozens of documents leaked. Some real, most fake. But one in particular shocked everyone. An edited video showing Jane accepting an envelope of cash. Jane stood frozen in her office, watching the chaos unfold online. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Jane, don't open your email." "Ethan, we've got a PR crisis." "The CEO. It's Lena. This is war." "Jack." Meanwhile, Lena sat in a penthouse suite, champagne in hand. They wanted a storm, she said to herself. Now they'll drown in it. But she didn't notice that her laptop camera light was glowing red. Ethan, watching from his hidden surveillance terminal, smirked. "Keep talking, Lena." Jane, refusing to hide, walked into the main lobby and faced the whispers head-on. "You really think I took bribes?" she asked a coworker. The woman hesitated. Jane pulled out her phone and showed the original footage, unedited, clearly proving the video was fake. "That's what she does," Jane said, voice calm but razor-sharp. "She manipulates what you see. Don't let her win." That night, Ethan tracked the source of the leaks to a remote server farm, rented under a fake ID. "We can't wait for legal," he told Jack. "We shut it down tonight." "Then I'm coming with you," Jack said. "You? You can barely operate a flash drive." "I can punch someone. That counts." 1:32 a.m., server farm. Downtown. Ethan and Jack broke into the facility using stolen credentials. They found the server tagged LM Core. Lena's master key to everything. "Copy what you can. I'll watch the door," Jack said. But before Ethan could finish, the alarm triggered. Security guards swarmed in. Jack threw the first punch. Ethan grabbed the drive. They ran like hell. Out the back. Into the rain. Sirens blaring behind them. Back at Jane's apartment. She received the file Ethan just sent. Lena's confession log. A full recording. Clear as day. Lena on a video call saying, "If I take Jane down, the rest will fall like dominoes." And Jack. Collateral. Jane's hands trembled, but not from fear. From clarity. Somewhere across town. Lena's smile vanished as she received a message. Subject, burned. Attachment, you talking. In HD. She dropped her glass. For the first time she knew. They had her. But she still had one card left to play. She whispered into her phone. Bring her mother into this. The file was clear. Target. Dr. Evelyn Blackwell, former forensic psychologist. Mother of Jane Carter. The name hit Jane like a punch to the chest. She has nothing to do with this, she whispered. But Lena didn't care. Elsewhere, Lena met with a stranger in a shadowed cafe. She doesn't know, Lena said, eyes sharp. The man across the table stirred his coffee slowly. She will, he replied, voice low. When the ghosts knock loud enough. This was Dr. Marcus Hale, an ex-colleague of Evelyn Blackwell, and the one person who knew what Jane was never told. Her mother used to profile criminal minds for the government, including Lena's father. Back at Jane's apartment, Jack stood by the window while Ethan read through a new report. Jane, you need to see this, Ethan said, handing her the tablet. It was a sealed government record Ethan had decrypted. Patient 42, Leonard Morgan. Clinical diagnosis, dissociative psychopathy. Jane's eyes widened. Morgan. That's Lena's father? And your mother was his psychologist, Ethan confirmed, before the whole case was buried. Meanwhile, Lena stood at her father's abandoned estate, staring at a room lined with clippings and photos. Every picture had one thing in common: Evelyn Blackwell's face, crossed out in red ink. They erased you, Dad, Lena muttered. But I'll rewrite the ending. Later that night, Jane received a call from a number she hadn't seen in years. She picked up. Jane, it's Mom. Dr. Evelyn Blackwell's voice was steady, but tight with fear. You need to leave the city. Now. Why? What's going on? This isn't about corporate sabotage anymore. It's about legacy, vengeance, and your life. The line went dead. At Ethan's hideout, they gathered around the files. Ethan tapped the last decrypted document. Your mom testified in secret. She helped put Lena's father in a facility. He died there, unmedicated. Jane's voice was quiet. And now Lena blames her and me. Jack looked Jane dead in the eye. Then we don't run. We end this. Jane's hand clenched into a fist. We fight with the truth. Somewhere deep in Lena's private bunker, she slid a sealed envelope into a file marked Project Athena, Phase 2. Inside, a photograph of Jane as a child and Evelyn standing behind her. Lena whispered, I'm not trying to destroy you, Jane. I'm trying to make you remember. Rain lashed against the windows of the small cabin hidden in the woods. Jane stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the woman she hadn't seen in years. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. Dr. Evelyn Blackwell looked older, her eyes heavier, but her voice remained steady. I was wondering how long it would take before the path found you. Inside, the fireplace crackled. Jane paced while Evelyn slowly poured tea. Why didn't you tell me? About Lena. About her father. Evelyn set the cup down, then sat. Because you were a child when it happened. Leonard Morgan wasn't just a patient, Jane. He was a monster. Lena thinks you're the reason he died. He didn't die. Not exactly. Jane blinked. What? Evelyn's hand shook slightly as she pulled out a small worn journal. He was declared dead, but the facility faked it to bury the case. The truth is, he escaped. Meanwhile, back in the city, Ethan and Jack discovered that Project Athena wasn't just about revenge. It was a genetic experiment file. Wait, is this real? Ethan asked. Jack scanned the documents. Medical reports, DNA sequences, patient lists. Lena's father was part of a covert government program. Psychological manipulation. Mind conditioning. Evelyn was the lead profiler. So Lena's obsession isn't just personal, it's inherited. Back at the cabin, Evelyn turned to Jane. You have to understand, Lena isn't just angry. She's been conditioned to continue what her father started. What does that mean? It means you're not just her rival, Jane. You're her final test. Suddenly the cabin phone rang. Evelyn answered. The line was silent until a familiar voice whispered. Hello, doctor. Ready for another session? The line cut off. Evelyn turned pale. She's found us. That night, as thunder crashed outside, Evelyn gave Jane a flash drive. This has everything. Files on her father. On me. Even on you. On me. Jane, you were part of the experiment too. Jane's heart stopped. What? Not directly. But they monitored you. Your behavior. Your reactions. Leonard was obsessed with how children form identity under pressure. Jane stepped back, shaking. So all my life, I was being watched. Protected, Evelyn corrected. Then why do I feel like I'm just another piece in someone else's game? Elsewhere, Lena sat alone in her soundproof room, playing recordings of Jane's voice from years ago, clipped from interviews, private calls, even security audio. Each sound file labeled with emotion tags. Anger, sadness, guilt, defiance. She smiled. She's almost ready. As Evelyn packed her things, she stopped in front of an old photograph, Jane as a baby, sitting beside another girl with icy eyes. Jane walked over. "Who's that?" Evelyn hesitated. Her name was Lily. "Wait, Lena's real name is Lily?" Evelyn nodded. "You two were in the same facility. Same playroom. Same study. And I never knew? Because I made sure you forgot." Jane sat by the fireplace. Evelyn's flash drive clenched in her hand. Inside her chest, chaos. In her head, static. And behind her eyes, shadows. "Why would you erase my memories?" Jane asked quietly. Evelyn exhaled. "Because you saw something no child should ever see." She placed a photo in Jane's hand. A grainy image of a playroom, two little girls sitting side by side. One was Jane. The other was Lily. Only now, the smile on the second girl's face made Jane's skin crawl. Meanwhile, Lena sat in front of a giant screen. A blinking prompt. "Execute project." "Or plus?" She typed. "Yes." All across the city, subliminal messages began flooding ad screens, background music, and even smart speakers. A psychological trap. A pattern meant to trigger Jane's repressed memory. "Let's see if she remembers what she did," Lena whispered. Back at the cabin, Jane jolted upright from sleep. She'd heard a tune in her dream, soft, almost like a lullaby, but off. "That song," she whispered. Evelyn froze. "You heard it. It was playing when the fire started. Wasn't it?" Evelyn's hands trembled. "You weren't supposed to remember that." Suddenly, memories flooded back. A burning room. Screams. Tiny fingers gripping hers. A door slamming shut. And her voice screaming, "Lily, come back." But Lily never did. Jane stared at Evelyn. "You lied to me. I protected you. You let me believe she died in an accident." Evelyn's voice cracked. "Because the truth was worse. You escaped. She didn't. And now she wants you to pay." In the city, Jack and Ethan tracked the digital signature of Project Orpheus to a media server in a music streaming company. "She's using sound to unlock Jane's memory?" Jack asked. "It's Lena. She weaponizes everything." They shut down the server too late. Jane's mind was already unraveling. That night, Jane sat in the forest, the lullaby looping in her head. "Why did I leave her?" she whispered. And from the darkness, "You didn't." Jane turned. Lena, standing 10 feet away. No weapons. No guards. Just that chilling smile. "You ran. I stayed. You were the good girl. I was the experiment." Jane's breath caught. "You started the fire, didn't you?" Lena's eyes glittered. "I wanted us both to burn. But you made it out. And they made me forget who I was. Until I remembered." She stepped closer. "So now I'm returning the favor." She reached into her coat and dropped a photo at Jane's feet. Jane, age 6, standing over a broken toy covered in blood. Lena whispered, "Let's see how deep the truth goes," then vanished into the trees. Back in the cabin, Jane stared at the photo. Ethan's voice buzzed through her phone. "Jane, you okay?" "No." "You want backup?" "No." "Then what do you want?" Jane looked at the trees burning in the distance. "I want to remember everything, even if it destroys me." The abandoned asylum stood silent beneath the blood-red sky. Its name, St. Delora Institute, long since erased from public records. But Jane knew it. She'd been here before. And Lena was waiting inside. Inside the main hall, the lights flickered. Dust clung to the walls, and the sound of the lullaby echoed down the halls, distorted, broken, like a memory trying to scream. Jack and Ethan stood outside in the surveillance van, monitoring Jane's tracker. "You sure about this?" Jack asked. "She has to face this herself," Ethan replied. "This isn't a rescue. This is a reckoning." Room 108, the playroom. Jane stepped in and froze. The walls were exactly the same. Paintings of stars and animals, a broken carousel, and a mirror. Her reflection wavered, then split, standing behind her. "Lena, welcome back, Jane," she said softly. "We were supposed to die here, remember?" Jane turned, fists clenched. "You set that fire." "We set it. Together. But only one of us got rescued. I was a child. So was I." Lena snapped. "But they saved you. Gave you a new name. A clean slate. Me? They buried me alive." She stepped closer, voice trembling. "You think I want revenge?" "No, Jane. I want you to look me in the eyes and admit you forgot me." Jane didn't look away. "I didn't forget you, Lena. They made me, and I've hated myself for that every day since I started remembering." Suddenly, Lena pulled a gun from her coat, hand shaking. "I don't want to kill you, Jane. I want to break you." "Then shoot," Jane whispered. "But know this, if you pull that trigger, you prove you're not the victim anymore. You're the villain." Lena's hand trembled harder. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Why do you sound like her?" she choked. "Like Evelyn? Because she's my mother. And you were my sister." Silence. The lullaby stopped. Lena collapsed to her knees. The gun hit the floor. "I just wanted to be remembered," she whispered. Jane knelt beside her. "You are." 1 hour later, police swarmed the asylum. Lena didn't resist. As they let her out, she looked back at Jane. "This isn't over." Jane nodded. "I know." 1 week later, Jane sat with Evelyn on a hospital bench. The flash drive, now decrypted, rested in Jane's hand. "Are you going to read it all?" Evelyn asked. "I already lived it." Final scene. Jack approached Jane outside the courthouse. "She's being transferred to a psychiatric facility, where she should have been from the start." Jane said. "You did it. You stopped her." Jane turned toward the rising sun. "No. I understood her. And sometimes that's the only way to win." She walked away silent. But behind her, in the shadows, a second flash drive sat on a bench. What if Jane forgets again, Lena escapes camp and someone else shows up? Follow me if you want to hear the more intense part 2. Thank you for listening.